And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we so love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City, as they say, the city of 9 million stories. We just spent an hour with Caitlin Belly. She is a pro-decriminalization activist from the sex worker industry. We'll have that already up on Facebook. And pretty dynamic stuff, what we like to call here Third Rail Radio. But let's get right down to it. First of all, we did have a few technical issues today, so we are not on Go Local Live or Go Local Prov. We are broadcasting from the facebook.com/the Coalition Radio page. It is my great pleasure to introduce someone who, to the Libertarian community, as they used to say on the Borch Belt, needs no introduction. But I mean that in this case because at one point or another, Dan Fishman has held a sign at an intersection near you, has appeared in a free speech cage, which we got to talk more about, has shown up at your convention, probably bought you a couple drinks, probably told some pretty good stories, has engineered an endorsement for you, has worked to get resources from the National Party directed at your efforts, and this was all well before he even, quite frankly, posited the notion of becoming the latest executive director of the Libertarian National Party. I can't think of a person who is better suited for this job, and there were a lot of us, and there were some very fine people that were in the running for this job. Good yes. People who dedicated a lot of time to the party, a lot of time to the organization, and given themselves greatly. But, and this is the editorial part of the show, Dan brings to the table a unique sense of positivity when all seems to be on fire. He brings together a practical political experience that few in the party can match. He brings in a sense of organization and management skills that are so necessary, and I can tell you because I believe I have the best vice chairman of any Libertarian party in the country. As I like to say, my executive committee can beat up your executive committee. But I can't think of really a better person for this job. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce, and he's been here before, but in his first time in his capacity as executive director of the Libertarian Party, Dan Fishman. Dan, thank you for joining us tonight.
Always a pleasure to be on the Coalition, and especially a pleasure to spend some time talking with you, Pat.
Right. So now, I want to give you the opportunity to give a little bit of background. Now, in the run-up to, if you will, the process of selecting, what I found fascinating, and it was so well done, was that you took time to reach out to literally every caucus, every splinter group, every sub-organization known to within the party, the greater libertarian universe. And the beauty of that was, number one, you showed respect to a lot of people's efforts. A lot of people who you're not going to see on the LNC, who will never be the head of a committee, who will never take the podium in Orlando or NOLA or Austin. These are people who have literally spent their life working for the cause. The people that are so important, the people who table at county fairs, the people who do the door-to-door position. So a big part of your move into the position and essentially asking for the job was to do that. What was the motivation for that? Tell me about your thought process in reaching out to become executive director.
So, for those who don't know, and I know you do, I had a very successful career as a software engineer in Boston, and I was quite content with that. I had gotten involved in libertarian politics because I heard the call that everybody else did. And then in August, I was running for auditor in the state of Massachusetts. I had a good pitch that in 30 seconds convinces people to vote for me. Why would you elect a Republican or a Democrat to audit Republicans and Democrats? Makes complete sense. And in August, the company that I was working for came to me and said, Dan, we are pre-IPO, and you are one of our most expensive people, and we'd like to offer you a severance. And I said, I'll take it, because that means I can run full-time. So from August till November, I ran full-time. I put everything I could. I drove all over the state of Massachusetts. I spoke to every group I could get to. Usually I was doing 3 or 4 speaking events a week, every place I could go. But a week before the election, I had a feeling about what was going to happen. Even though I was endorsed by the Boston Globe, I was endorsed by the Worcester Gazette-Telegram, the two biggest papers in the state. But a week before the election, I'm in Wellesley, Massachusetts, speaking to League of Women Voters, so let's just say Democrats squared, and I give them my speech. Why would you elect a Republican or Democrat? To audit Republicans and Democrats. Talk about how I want to put all the books online, on time, complete transparency. And I can tell I am reaching the crowd. And at the end, a woman stands up. She says, Dan, I love everything you had to say. I think you would be an amazing auditor. But I know that the party has told me that if I don't vote blue all the way down, that shows weakness of the party, and that allows Donald Trump to build a wall, and I cannot have that.
Oh, Lord.
And people stood up and started clapping. And that's when I realized the country is so polarized right now, and it's not by accident. So Calvin Coolidge said, the business of America is business. Americans are excellent at process. We learn how to do things incredibly efficiently. And at some point in time, the Republicans and the Democrats realized that instead of having to run a positive campaign for a new candidate each election cycle, it's easier to run a negative campaign against the other party because you can run the same campaign over and over and over again. And it's polarized, and it's based on fear. And if you ask Democrats who they want to see elected, the number one answer is anybody but Trump.
Right.
Because they're so fearful of what's going on. Republicans, it's the same thing. They're so fearful of the other side that they vote Republican, not because they support their candidate, but they're so afraid because the parties have demonized people. And so at the end of the election, I was fully planning on going back to work, but I am so concerned. So I believe in the Ayn Rand idea that the individual is the ultimate minority. I like to say we're all minorities of one. As a person who is a minority of one, I worry about the collective power of government more now than ever, especially when you see how effective the parties are at demonizing the other side. And so for libertarians, we're always on the other side, right? We're always the party of opposition. And so what is that going to mean for us as we start to get demonized? And you see it, and I'm going to touch on this a couple of things. You see things happening against libertarians right now that we've never really seen before, and it's because we're getting successful. But so that's what the run-up was, is that I got to a point where I said, I can't stay on the sideline anymore. I flatter myself and I think that I have a skill at conveying the message. I know that I'm a good organizer. I know that I'm good at helping organizations to complete tasks. And so I wanted to bring that to the Libertarian Party because I want us to start finishing things that we've started. We can't do it. We have, the Democrats have stolen intersectionality. They say, oh, Democrats, that's what we are. But in reality, libertarians are the ones who should be winning the battle of intersectionality because every person in the United States, in some way, is affected by government. We have that intersection with them. What we have to do, we have to find the way that we identify with everybody and focus on that and build that up in them instead of finding the way that we don't identify with them, the way that we oppose them, excuse me, and try to block them off for that.
You raised inadvertently a critical point. I don't want to go too far astray because I want to talk about your objectives in actually running the party. I don't think there's a time when it's been more important to be overtly libertarian, to be unapologetically libertarian, to wear your libertarianism, if you will, on your sleeve, on your heart, and no longer couch ourselves in sort of that, I deny. We've got a lot to be proud of, despite our challenges on an electoral basis, because we have been on the forefront, the bleeding edge, if you will, of societal issues that 40, 50 years later, society is coming around to see our point. And they're doing it kicking and screaming. And yet, here we've been all along. And you're right, the message is simple. Self-ownership, respecting the rights of the ultimate minority, the individual, and allowing the human spirit to explode in a joy of living the lifestyle and the life that they choose is best for them. I've always been a capitalist because I believe that capitalism is the mechanism by which the individual reaches their full potential. So is it time for libertarians to stop apologizing for being libertarian?
I don't think so. I think there's nothing to apologize for.
Right.
But the message that I think that we're not getting out there is that, and I truly believe this, that the essence of libertarianism is loving and trusting your neighbor, because you are willing to give your neighbor exactly the same rights that you have. In fact, you insist on that and say, nobody else can have more or less than rights than I have, because rights are what, we are, as minorities of one, we are the defenders of the rights of every individual. And a lot of times what we see government doing is government is specifically trying to break down the rights of people. I had a fascinating conversation with a reporter this morning who wanted to know why libertarians opposed mandatory family leave. And I said, here's the thing about it. It's not that we oppose family leave. In fact, we would encourage everybody to find a place, an employer that will offer you that, because we think that those employers probably are better in terms of thinking about how their business is going to run. Because as an employer, for me, I want the best employees, and I want the employees to be happy about what they're doing and knowing that they can take care of their families. That's a critical issue. But I'm not going to use force. I'm not going to throw somebody in jail because they own a landscaping shop and they can't give family leave. More than that, if you think about who does this family leave restriction hurt the most, it's smaller businesses, right? Walmart loves the idea of a mandatory family leave because that stops the mom and pop store from being able to open up a business and compete with them.
Right.
All the time that you see mandatory laws come into place, it's generally because they think of this as a barrier to entry for a smaller business. So family leave, great idea. Mandatory family leave, ways that are supposed to force other businesses to have to spend money that Walmart or Uber or another giant company, the way that they do it, that's a terrible idea. And so for us, we don't have to be apologetic. We shouldn't be apologetic. What we should do is emphasize the fact that our position is not based out of the idea that we believe everybody should take care of themselves. On the contrary, libertarians, more than anybody else, recognize that we are bound to each other through the compact of humanity. And that is a stronger bond than any law or government is ever going to make. Our relationship back and forth to each other works because it's personal. It will never work because we are forced to be friends.
Right. We don't endorse individual behaviors. We simply endorse the right to you as an adult to make your own decision to engage in behavior as long as it accrues no harm to anyone else. It's very simple. And yet, as we all know, that this week in a certain website, they again became more obsessed with the trappings of an individual candidate or trying to conflate an extreme view by an individual as that of an entire organization. They're almost obsessed with trying desperately. There's desperation in the air by those that support the duopoly to find some type of rationalization to walk away from an organization like us. It's
right.
Let's talk about.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk about the party though, because you're going to occupy multiple roles as executive director, and for folks who are listening or will listen in the future to this, a key area of concern for many, and there's some wonderful people who have and are continuing to work at headquarters, if you will. But there's been a concern, and there's a challenge here in trying to bring up the management of the Libertarian Party and the ability to execute projects, the ability to bring to scale the tools that we need to function as a political party in the year 2019 that I think your talents squarely address. So what are some of the projects that you're getting involved in? Are you going to engage in any sort of restructuring at some point of how the executive office works? Give us your vision.
Sure. So I don't know that I would call it restructuring per se, but repurposing for sure. We're going to be doing a lot of repurposing because one of the things that happens right now is that the Libertarian Party headquarters staff. So the first day I got there, I was struck, and I shouldn't say that I was amazed, but I was struck at how hardworking everybody is. everybody in that office is working as hard as they can, full tilt. One of the problems that happens in that is that we are currently disorganized in the way that we address projects, because something comes in and that has to be done today, and something else that comes in and that has to be done in 3 hours. And so we see the best and hardest working staff going from one emergency to another emergency to another emergency. Now, coming from a startup environment, I recognize the path to this, that's the path to disaster. And the problem is that the better and more hardworking your staff is, the more they're able to prevent that disaster from happening. And so this staff is very hardworking, and they've been able to prevent the disaster. But as it keeps accumulating, it's going to build up. And so one of the things we have to do is be a lot more organized in the way things happen. And so as an example, some of the changes that are coming down the path right now, we no longer are going to put up changes to the web page the same day that we make them. Okay? We know in advance when we're going to do this. So like what we do in production, and when I've worked in web services, you put your changes up and everybody looks at them on a separate site for a week before you say, okay, flip the switch and make it go live. That's a good thing to do. Emails that we send out, every communication that we send out, we are not going to compose and send on the same day. We're going to get things done earlier, put them in the pipeline, have a schedule for when we do things. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot of is that we've been communicating a lot with membership. I would like to order and structure the way that we communicate with membership. Another thing that's critical that happens is we need to build up our knowledge and our relationship and the value-added proposition of membership. So, I'm going to talk about my plan. I don't want to speechify too much, but I have a 4-point plan that I want to really make a lot of progress on by the end of this year. Number 1 is membership. Okay, so first of all, I know there's a lot of people out there who are watching this who are not members of the National Party. Come home. We need you. www.lp.org/join. And I'm going to tell you why we need you, because we are going to understand our membership better, because one of the things that's coming very soon is going to be a members-only website. Now, for those of us who grew up in the 80s, the phrase members only invokes a terrible sports champion, but we're going to have a members-only website.
Are we going to have a Sansa-Belt level of contribution and
right. Yeah, some sort of terrible gift for joining the members-only website. Mm-hmm. But so we're going to have a members website where we're going to come in and we're going to start surveying you, and we're going to know who you are and what are your big issues. Because right now, we don't know. We know that there's a variety of issues in the LP, and we know what people's top issues are. But as an example, we have no idea who's really invested in fathers' rights, which is a big issue right now in the country. We have no idea who's actually invested in the sex workers issue, which is a big issue in this country. We have no idea who's really interested in crypto. All these issues that are important to libertarians, but we need to find ways to focus people and bring them together so that we get more done and that we give you better targeted messages about issues that are going on. And so that's number 1. And so we have to increase membership, and we're going to do a couple things about it. We're going to have an alumni plan. So if we want you to sponsor 4 basic memberships at your alma mater. It's going to cost you $100, but that means for me at UMass Boston, there's going to be 4 students who are now going to be members of the Libertarian Party because I'm going to give them that gift. Hopefully next year I'll sponsor 4 new ones. Those 4 will go on and retain their own membership. We got to start hitting kids at college campuses. We know that that's a big deal. Membership is number 1. Number 2 is fundraising. Money is the mother's milk of politics. And I can tell you some of the things that money that goes to the National Party does. So we had a really big success yesterday. Texas tried to pass a terrible ballot access law. We fought it. Okay, and essentially what it would have done is it would have raised the number of votes, the percentage of votes required for ballot access from 5% to 10%. To put it in context, Mark Miller, when he ran for Railroad Commission, and those who don't know, people in Texas, Railroad Commission is the person who's in charge of oil and gas. Mark Miller was a petroleum engineer. He was dominatingly the most qualified candidate for the race. He was endorsed by every paper in the state of Texas. Any thinking person thought that Mark Miller was the right choice for Railroad Commissioner. He got just over 5%, which gave Texas ballot access. But the Republicans, recognizing the threat there, and for the first time in a generation, Texas is actually in play. If you look at the numbers, Beto and Cruz There are a lot of people who think the Democrats could win Texas in 2020. I don't know if that's true or not. But the Republicans are very afraid of that, so they want to keep the Libertarians off the ballot. So they changed the restriction. They wanted to change it from 5% to 10%. So we actually invested money there. We lobbied. Okay, we had a lot of things that I don't want to go too much into depth with because it reveals some political strategy things that we're capable of doing. But the long and short of it is that the bill came out of committee, it was on the calendar, and it died yesterday. And the Libertarian Party had something to do with that. That's a big deal because that changes things in Texas. We're getting ready to get involved in a case that's going on in Pennsylvania where, so I don't know the facts of the matter, but to me, this is what it seems like it happened. This is just speculation. So let's just be clear that legally, I'm not saying this is what happened. This is my speculation. But it seems to me like what happened is some Republican operatives signed a petition sheet for a petitioner in Pennsylvania, then went back and said, hey, these guys forged my signature. I never signed it. So right now, 2 Libertarians are being petitioned, being subpoenaed to appear in front of a grand jury. Why do you have a forged signature on your petition sheet? Now, the reality of it is, there's no way they could know what happened, right? You don't validate people when they sign or anything like that, right? This is just pure intimidation tactics by the Republicans to say, hey, you guys, stop messing with our elections. We don't like it when you take the votes because we own all the votes. But this is something that National is able to get into. We have a permanent counsel. We brought him on the phone call. We're going to have another phone call about this tomorrow. We are going to win this case, but it's one of the things that, at the national level, bringing in that prestige, that level of expertise, helps a lot. So that's one of the things that happens with membership. That's one of the things that happens with fundraising, too. One of the things about fundraising is that it allows us to retain a permanent counsel, a guy who is always ready to fight legal issues for libertarians. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing. Number 3, we're going to work on helping out the states and affiliates more. One of the things that I want to do, so you guys have the benefit in Rhode Island of having a data genius in Mike Rinaldi. Massachusetts was lucky enough, I did some data work for them. That kind of talent is not distributed evenly among the 50 states. National can provide a better solution for a lot of the states. You go to the Secretary of State, you get your data file, you give it to us. We'll massage it, we'll put it in the computer, we will put it in the database, and then we will distribute to you the important information. We'll set it up so that you can find out who registered as a Libertarian last quarter, who changed their registration from Republican or Democrat to Independent. All of these statistics, what cities, what villages, what towns seem to have mass migration in their voter registration. Data that can be useful for the states. So we want the states to become partners with us. We want to be a value-added proposition so that we can start doing, because that work is all sort of the same at the database level. We just need people to start giving us the data and set up the ability to process it. And then the number 4 thing, and this is a critical one, we are going to hire a publicist, and we are going to get our best speakers on national television. And that is a doable thing. So I have a friend who's a financial advisor. He wanted to grow his business, so he hired a publicist, paid him $50,000, but then he ended up on CNN Money, on MSNBC, on whatever the Fox business show is, little 3-minute, 5-minute segments. But that's doable. Those shows are desperate for content. If you have a publicist, they will put you on. I want to see Nick Sarwark on those shows. I want to see Larry Sharp on those shows. I want to see Pat Ford on those shows. We can do all of these things. Convey the libertarian idea in a national media audience, putting our best people forward. So that's sort of my 4-point plan.
No, it's outstanding stuff. You and I have talked about media extensively. You've got a nation that's starved for information, vast pipeline out there, desperate for new content, interesting content. I got to say, especially certain times lately, what's more interesting than us? Yikes. Yep. But again, we provide a provocative, thoughtful, often challenging response to the status quo on just about every issue. And, you get a room full of libertarians. We'll disagree with each other over the how many libertarians you can fit on the needle of a pin. But ultimately, when it comes to the larger issue in the larger sense, our politicians, our leaders, our speakers, our guys actually knocking on doors to run for office, people constantly remark that they always get answers from libertarians. And the reason why is because we have a philosophy, a belief system. We actually believe what we're peddling.
Right, and one of the things that I think we really need to convey is that we really do have the core two principles, right? Number one, self-ownership. You own your body, right? And to deny that would be to argue that somebody else can own your body. Mm-hmm. We fought a war about that in this country. Nobody owns anybody else. You own your body, which means you can put whatever you want to into your body. You take whatever you want to out of your body. You control your body, and you control the product of your labor because you own your body. No person or government has a preeminent right to the product of your labor. And then the second thing we think, and this is it, don't use force against other people for political or economic reasons. Defend yourself all you want. Libertarians are really big on self-defense. But don't use force to get your way politically. And, when you talk to people about libertarians, they always say, you guys were just in favor of pot. We're not in favor of legalizing cannabis because we want you to get high. I mean, you want to get high, that's okay. We're in favor of legalizing cannabis because we don't like the idea of families being torn apart, of people being put in jail for doing something that doesn't hurt anybody else. Our opposition we're opposed to using force against people who aren't hurting anybody. So it's not really that we're pro-cannabis. Cannabis is a mechanism. There's a famous statement that, astronomy is not about telescopes, right? Astronomy is about studying the stars. Libertarianism is not about cannabis. Libertarianism is about liberty. And cannabis is just a liberty issue. In the same way that, sports gambling is a liberty issue, right? Because or just any gambling, how can I, betting on March Madness with a bunch of my friends, how can that be illegal, right? We're not hurting anybody. Why is the government going to make a law about that? Or reselling things, right? For example, there's the famous case of Eric Garner, who was reselling loose cigarettes, right? He bought a pack of cigarettes, started selling them out one at a time. These were cigarettes that he had bought and paid for. Why is it illegal for him to resell them? Everybody knows that he could have given them away for free, right? I mean, if you're a smoker, I quit April 27th, 2001. But I remember bumming cigarettes for about a week when I was still trying to quit. So everybody knows cigarettes are given away freely between people. That's clearly legal. Why does it suddenly become legal if instead of me saying, hey, can I bum a cigarette from you? Can I buy a cigarette from you from $1? What is the magic? And the magic that makes that illegal is government wanting to control that transaction. And that's wrong. It's a liberty issue for us. It's not about cigarettes. It's not about cannabis. It's not about gambling. It's not about any of the myriad of different issues. It's about liberty. And the critical thing is that we don't pretend to know enough to judge what's okay liberty. You got to judge what's okay liberty for yourself. We don't pretend that we know, because there was a point in time in our collective past, right, where Americans said slavery was okay, when they said that Jim Crow was okay, when they said that marriage was between a man and a woman. All of these discriminatory practices that were codified into law in our country. So what are the issues right now that we are saying, well, this should be illegal, that in 30 years we're going to be like, God, what were we thinking? It's crazy. We don't know.
And I'll give you a perfect example here in Rhode Island. It's a minor league issue in the bigger scheme of things, but it points directly to the corrosive power of government. Rhode Island was, I believe, one of the first states in the nation to legalize sports gambling. Now, 3 months ago, sports gambling, bad. Must arrest you. Must take your property. Must confine you to jail. Now, sports gambling, good. As long as it's the government doing it. Monopolies. I did a simple post the other day, and it's funny how the reactions I got privately. The only monopoly that should be broken up is government. Any other organization that's successful is a testament to free enterprise. If in fact they're using the government to engage in coercive or manipulative practices for their own advantage, okay, let's break up government. Individual businesses are taking advantage of what they're being offered by a corrupted government.
Right. And the best example of the hypocrisy of that is the lottery, right? I mean, the lottery is essentially a tax on stupidity, right? Because you're not going to win the lottery. You're just not going to win.
Yeah, I am.
Everybody
Yeah, I am.
knows that.
I'm going to win.
Well, all right. With the exception of Pat, nobody else listening to this is going to win the lottery. And you should blame Pat because he's buying all the winning tickets.
Right.
However, in reality, why does it exist? It exists because it generates money for the state. And they don't even try to hide that idea. This thing that they say is so bad that nobody else can do it, they can do it because they want to generate money for the state. Mm-hmm. That's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. Because in reality, they're taking money out of people's pockets. If there's some social program, why not just convince the people to support the social program and not have government take out 10%, 20%, whatever it is, as the middleman? And the answer is, you have an industry, right, the government industry, that depends on making sales and depends on delivering service. Government believes now that they are in the customer service business. And so they're doing everything they can to make their customers happy by delivering services. But in order to do that, they got to get money from you and me and from everybody else. And they don't care how they do it.
And at the same time, they continue to invade and grab larger pieces of the open market and essentially privatize them in the name of government, eliminating competition, eliminating innovation, and limiting growth of those services where people can actually profit. And there's 100 different examples, but it's, again, I'll use the word corrosive tonight. It's corrosive to growth, it's corrosive to innovation, and people fail to profit individually. And again, capitalism depends, I'll spare you the greed is good, but ultimately, why capitalism is an enabler to innovation is because ultimately people are driven in our society by the profit factor and by the ability to grow. And to the degree that government takes over that space, we eliminate all of that.
Yeah, one of the great examples of this, if you haven't read Mary Ruwart's new book about the pharmaceutical industry, it is phenomenal. It should be required reading for everybody. Dr. Mary Ruwart, Ruwart. You can find it on Amazon. And she talks about a change in the law that happened in 1963 where the FDA asserted authority over the pharmaceutical industry and said, we're going to set the standards that you have to pass in order to bring a drug to market. Prior to that, the rate of drugs coming to market was exceptional. After that, it was crushed. And they used the thalidomide horror story as an excuse. In reality, thalidomide didn't happen in the United States, okay? In the United States, there were a few people who came over from overseas, and some thalidomide babies were ordered, but in general, American doctors felt like thalidomide wasn't proven, and they weren't prescribing it in the United States. However, the drug that killed the most people ever, Vioxx, right? By a mile. And Vioxx was approved by the FDA. So it went through the entire approval process, everything out there, and yet Vioxx was incredibly deadly.
Right.
So what we got was a pharmaceutical system that now is controlled by a few giant corporations as opposed to, we used to have a situation where there were a lot of different competing companies bringing different drugs to bear that really benefited the consumer, because having a lot of drugs out there and consumers having different options to use them as they see fit, that benefited everybody. Now, there's only big pharma. It's almost impossible for a small company to compete. And the reason why is because big pharma used their advantage, their money, to put in legislation that made it very difficult for them to have any competition. How many drug companies are there? There's probably only about 10 big drug companies that control 90% of the market. That is by design. That is through companies using their financial influence to have government use the power to restrict our restrictions.
I want to take a brief moment here to pay homage, if you will, to our sponsors. Of course, the Yacht Club Bottling Company, yachtclubbottling.com, America's finest boutique soda, 100 plus years old. Hell, they were a boutique soda before we even knew we needed a boutique soda. They predate hipsters, incredibly enough. Their root beers, their sarsaparilla, natural flavors, pure cane sugar, the finest, cleanest water, straight from New England. Yeah, it's Yacht Club soda. Their owners are Libertarian, and as importantly, the reason why, if you're up here in New England, we ask you to buy a bottle, is that they're willing to support what I call third rail radio. And third rail radio are conversations like this, where we're challenging really the status quo in a way that's unimaginable in conventional media. So Yacht Club Bottling Works, Yacht Club Soda, and of course, our good friend Daryl Gould, airsciences.net, providing mold remediation services across New England, biohazard containment, whether for your school, your home, your office, deliver really the cleanest environment that you can live in. And I want to point out at airsciences.net, he's got special opportunities for folks who are suffering from autoimmune diseases. He's got some free services that he can offer you to make your home safe so that you can, in fact, come home. Again, that's airsciences.net, Daryl Gould and his crew covering a good part of New England. If you're just joining us, we had some technical issues earlier this evening, so our live stream signal isn't up. But we will, in fact, be putting this up on podcast right after the show and sharing it on Facebook Live throughout what I call the Libertarian universe. Someone who is truly libertarian fabulous and has just taken the helm, if you will, as executive director of the National Libertarian Party is my good friend and someone I'm proud to call a friend, Dan Fishman. Dan, again, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to extend the invitation out. I'd love to have you join us on a semi-regular basis. I know, and I want to encourage the entire libertarian media world, and there are probably uncounted number of us out there who, recognizing that conventional media is not going to knock their doors down to embrace us, that we've done the libertarian thing and we've gone and created, well, our own little media universe. So I want to give my respect to all of them. But you're welcome here on a regular basis because I think it's important to deliver a really fluent message from headquarters to folks out in the field, out in the hinterlands, in the wilds of Rhode Island, or out in the Rockies, or wherever people are, again, out there at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning signing petitions, or at a county fair, or the people who are putting together a parade float, or the people who are running for office year after year after year, literally bleeding for the cause because they believe in liberty. They embrace our statement of principles. They embrace the non-aggression principle. They embrace everything good about being libertarian. And so, again, thank you for coming tonight, and I hope this will be like, we'll do this all the time. There are tremendous issues facing the party as we move forward. And tonight's a night of positivity because I believe our future is bright. We've got some fabulous people out there. We're getting geared up for 2020. We're addressing local elections at a level I don't think the party has ever seen.
Right.
First of all, let's discuss that in a sense. The biggest challenge I think facing the party is the question. And again, you're not going to be involved in candidate selection whatsoever. I want to make that clear. You're in a managerial role. But how important is it for the Libertarian Party to build the bench, to get libertarians in water boards, school boards, tax authorities? How important is that?
It's very important, and one of the critical realizations that people have to realize is that not everybody is a great candidate. And a lot of times there are people who want to be great, who want to be candidates. And one of the things that we started doing in Massachusetts, we said, you want to be a candidate? Great. We want you to be a candidate. Show us that you can do it by doing the critical mass thing. Show us that you can throw a fundraiser and get 10 people there. Because if you can do that, you could be a good candidate. But if you can't do that, and you got the bug, you probably could be a good campaign manager. So instead, if you can't do that part and have the first fundraiser for your own campaign, be a campaign manager, recruit a candidate to run, and now that candidate's in better shape because they've got a campaign manager already. So I like to think we ran a good campaign in Massachusetts last year. 50% of the success of that campaign was my campaign manager, Jeff Lyons. Okay? He ran a tight ship. He recruited volunteers. He made sure that everybody was doing what they're supposed to do. There was a point in time where we were at an event and a television camera showed up. And we thought it was just an event in a bar, and a television camera showed up. And before the camera had its light turned on, Jeff had removed the beer bottle from my hand. No candidate of mine is going to be drinking on camera. That sort of thing. Okay? And Jeff's going to be an amazing candidate one day. But the critical thing about it was he was part of the bench at that point in time. He was the campaign manager. We had a communications director. We had an art director. In fact, a lot of the great talent for my campaign is now working for the Ruff campaign, and I applaud their recognition of that talent. There is a reason to build a bench and recognize that not everybody starts off as a candidate. Get involved in a campaign. If you are a good candidate, and you know probably if you're a good candidate, because you will have won popularity contests before, and an election is fundamentally a popularity contest. Mm-hmm. You're a good libertarian, that's great too, but we want to have a team associated with it. And a team means recognizing everybody doing what they do best. The candidate is the best at being the candidate. The campaign manager is the best at being the campaign manager. Art director, all those other things. People who organized, we had door-knocking campaigns. We had call banking. We had a skunk works operation where, people went out and hung signs in places that I didn't tell them to hang signs there, but somehow signs ended up there. People like that working for the campaign together, that's what we have to do. And we have to understand that when we do stuff like that, we learn the art of campaigning, the art and the science of campaigning. I had the great good fortune to, when I was Northeast Director for the Johnson and Gov campaign, to work with Apollo Pizzell, who I believe to be the finest campaign mind in the Libertarian Party right now. And when I worked with him, I was director. I kept my mouth shut, and I listened because that guy's got lessons that he can teach me. I become better at serving the Libertarian Party, better at running campaigns by listening to what Apollo can teach me. And that's the attitude that we need to have across the board. We talk about building up the bench. When you sit on the bench, you're watching the stars out on the field. And you know that when the time comes, the coach is going to say, all right, Ford, I'm putting you in. And you'll have been studying and ready to go. You're going to play shortstop. But being on the bench, building up the bench, means that you are on the team, supporting the team up to that point in time. And that's absolutely what we need. We need people to get involved in campaigns. I would rather see, if my choice was 100 candidates running alone, or 25 candidates, each with 3 people on their campaign team, I would choose that. Because when you're working together on a campaign team, you get a lot more done. I'll tell you a great example of this was the Billy Hunt campaign in Rhode Island that had a phenomenal team. We saw results that were, can I say that I'm thrilled? I'm thrilled. Can I say that we won? We didn't quite win. But we are knocking on the door. Next year, we're going to kick the door down. But we are doing it. We're getting it better because that's a team that's been running together, learning how to play together, and we're getting better along the way. And that's what the Libertarian Party needs, is for every person to realize how they get to be a team player in the election process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fundraising. Let's talk about fundraising. You pointed out quite aptly it's the mother's milk. What, in the past, and I'm not here to challenge personalities or behavior of the past, but in the past, it would appear that fundraising was haphazard at times. You had a lot of development going on in the background. A lot of it, though, was geared to very specific and a handful of campaigns. It's clear that the party needs money. We absolutely need to get money into the party coffers, if for no other reason than to support some of the IT projects that you've got and to raise the media profile. Because, you can do it as a guerrilla, but it's a hell of a lot easier if you've got some hired guns helping you. So, how are you going to conduct fundraising? Is it going to be targeted towards specific events? I know you're going to be working aggressively. Jess is going to be wonderful at memberships, but give us a snapshot of how you plan on moving that forward.
So there's essentially different levels of fundraising. We are blessed in that we have people who a lot of times will say, you know what, I'm just going to give $25, or I'm going to give $5, or I'm going to give $100 to the Libertarian Party, in addition to their regular membership. And that's awesome when it happens. If you like what you're hearing right now, please feel free to go to the donation page and give something to the LP. But targeted, sustainable fundraising comes out of a large membership base and then a focus on larger donors who are interested in the cause and see us being effective. That's the number one thing that we have to do, because there are people out there, if you think about it, so anybody who's run a campaign as a libertarian knows that the most common thing that you will hear when you are out campaigning is, oh, I'm a libertarian too. All the time, we would hear people, we would go to political events and people would tell it's time for us to really go out and reach them and say, look, the time is now or never. The country is being more polarized. We need your help. So we're going to go after several major high-profile donors. You could probably name 10 of them right now. Mm-hmm. We're also going to work on very focused tasks that when we prove that the money makes a difference, because that's the other thing about these large-scale donors, is that they need to see that we're doing something that makes a difference. So ballot access is important. That's one of the things. So if you're, and let me make this clear right now, if you're a libertarian in one of the 17 states where we don't have ballot access right now, or 13 states, I think we're at 37 states with ballot access right now, 13 states required. Ballot access is something that means something to wealthy donors. Mm-hmm. The fact that we are the only party, besides the old parties, that has 50 state ballot access consistently year after year after year, that's going to be a big deal. So you want to donate something to the Libertarian Party? If you can go out and work for ballot access in one of those states, that's a big deal. And that's something to our larger scale donors that are getting things done. We are going to try to target some higher end donor events. I think we're going to do I'm not sure, the details of this have not been finalized yet, but I think we might try to do an event in Florida at some point in time to ask people to come down, spend some time on a warm beach with your fellow libertarians, listen to our fundraising pitch. Be voluntary, of course, because libertarians only do voluntary things. But events like that are a critical way to sort of, A, bond us together, but B, be a little more focused in fundraising that we're doing. Because just asking everybody for money once a week, that's not a good focused thing to do. I like that we're communicating with people on a regular basis, but I don't think that we're telling people what value proposition, because especially now, it's so easy to despair about our political environment that it's easier to say, you know what, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Mm-hmm. Why am I going to give any money to anything? I'm just going to keep it all for myself. We have to show people that we're making a difference. And we are. You know, you look at some of the changes that have happened recently, okay? People are more upset now about the militarization of the police, which that was a libertarian issue for a long time,
right?
Okay? People are more upset now about the unequal application, and I don't want to say that libertarians are the only ones talking about this, but the criminal justice system, criminal justice reform, that's something that libertarians have been talking about for a long time. We have been carrying that water, and certainly the communities that were persecuted, they were complaining about it as well. So it's not just us, but that's something the libertarians have been asking for. It feels like, and I say this as a white man in Massachusetts, it feels like the tide is turning, that I see that there's more awareness of the injustice in the quote-unquote justice system right now. If it looks that way to me, I'm hoping that it looks that way to people who are on the minority end of being arrested at a higher rate than anybody else. I hope to find a way that we are impacting the criminal justice system in a way that things are getting better.
You actually, and this is timely because you issued an email on this today. One of the issues that I don't feel we've worked hard enough at, given the consistency of war hawks, both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, is the peace issue. You sent out a communication today. Talk about that a little bit, about peace and what that means to the Libertarian Party, and how. And here's the critical difference between us and the duopoly. We don't manipulate our views in order to gain currency with people, so ultimately, we can gain currency. We've got views that we believe in because we have a statement of principles and a core philosophy. The question is, for example, the peace issue, I think, resonates now more than ever. And it's far less party-oriented than it's ever been. How do we use or continue to communicate how we feel about war and foreign adventures to reach out to people and bring them in-house that agree with us and then would support the party?
It's a critical question. And if I may, excuse me, I'm going to read something that's going to get you a little choked up. Mm-hmm. I went to the Vietnam Memorial for the very first time in D.C. Last year. And when I went there, I was there because I was doing the whole monument walk. I'd never seen it. I felt like it was time for me to go see it. Went down there, and when I saw it, I didn't realize what it still meant to people. There's a crowd there, and people stick notes in the wall And so there was one there that I saw, and I took a picture of it, and I'm going to read it to you now. Hey, lover, it's been 50 years since I saw you. I'm an old lady now, older than your grandma was when she drove us to the movies for our first date. When I saw her at your funeral, I wondered how, as frail as she was, she could stand there at the grave. Now I know because I'm old too. But not you. You are frozen in time. You are still the most beautiful boy I ever saw, and you made me promise when you left to remember that last look that you came back. But you never fucking came back. But I'm not writing this to be mad. I'm writing because I still love you, and I'll see you soon, and I promised I'd write to you until we were back together. Not too long now. All my love, Sarah. And so, yeah, exactly. And I saw that, and I thought about the fact that libertarians, when we talk about being anti-war, when we hold up those signs and we say, I'm already against the next war, we're talking about the fact that we are sending people off to die. And the worst, right, here's the thing that kills me the most, right? We haven't had a draft per se, but there's still selective service, right? Conscription is still available to the president and to the Congress. This president could issue an executive order and start the draft right now, okay? And that is the worst violation of liberty that there is. Okay? The idea that you could be drafted, your kids can be drafted, and forced to join an army, fight, die for the whim of a president, right? Because the president can on a whim send our troops overseas. All these things. We have got to end that right now. And that's actually a big issue that I want to start working on. I think it's a presidential issue. But we should start saying it's time to end conscription. It's time to pass a simple law. Because the Constitution doesn't specifically say the draft is legal. Okay, what it says is that the government is allowed to raise a military force. It doesn't say how or anything like that. It doesn't say anything about conscription. We could pass a law. And it's time for everybody to stand up and say, nobody can be forced into military service against their will. Very simple. That ends the draft. And as tragic as it is, and you look at these deaths in Vietnam, and it's astonishing. As tragic as that is, it's the liberty aspect of it that's even worse. The idea that government can compel you to become a soldier, right, to go fight, to carry a gun, to be trained. Do we need an army? Do we need self-defense? You can make an argument that there's time and places where all of us are combined for self-defense. But taking people against their will and forcing them to do it, it's terrible. Go ahead.
Interestingly enough, the recent movie about the Washington Post, for many, prompted either a revisitation or maybe a first acquaintance with the Pentagon Papers. And if you've ever read anything to do in the Pentagon Papers, then you understand the banality and the evil combined of war as we practice it here in America, where despite laws to the contrary, it is clearly the private army, if you will, of a sitting government that has no real legal authority to do it without the consent of Congress and ultimately without the consent of the people. It's really that simple, and yet that, I believe, the breakdown of that relationship between government and their ability to make war without the support of the people was really the first step that led to the omnipotent, all-powerful, evil government that exists today. That was the first step down the slippery slope.
I agree with you 100%. The one thing that Republicans and Democrats seem to agree upon is that there has to be a crisis, right? Crisis is how they justify the authority that comes from it. They differ on their definition of, on the means, on how they're going to deal with a crisis, but they create all these crises as authorization bills, essentially. We're kept in this state of endless debt and endless war with the idea that that empowers government to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And so this endless debt, right, that's coming up, we have, in many ways, so I would encourage everybody to go to 22trillion.org because Libertarian Party owns that and we're talking about the debt. But you know what? We realize it's not going to be sufficient to have 22trillion.org. So we also own 23trillion.org and 24trillion.org and 25trillion.org. And we are hoping that we never get that far, but who knows? And the problem is that debt is going to be an excuse for some really authoritarian changes in your lifestyle. For example, I really worry that the money in my 401k, the money in my IRAs, at some point in time, governments can say, you know what? We need that. We're going to take it from you, even though we promised that we didn't. Okay? Most of the people have money in banks, right? We just saw, right, Greece say, guess what? We need to pay off our debts. All the money in the banks, we are now collecting part of that. Mm-hmm. That could happen right now. We shouldn't be afraid that the government's going to take money from us, but we have to be aware of it because we've empowered government for all these crazy things. And the debt is one of the ways that the government has this excuse. And here's the thing that kills me about the debt, right? They, when the founders set up the Constitution, they said, you know what? We're not going to require a balanced budget because there could be an emergency where the United States might have to borrow money because, you know, that happened, right? And in Hamilton, we can talk about some of the state's debts and all those things. They said, okay, we're going to allow the government to run up a little debt, but we're going to put a ceiling because otherwise you might have a situation where they just would keep borrowing money, keep borrowing money. So we'll put a ceiling. And then nobody would ever raise that ceiling because they understand that's the purpose of why it's there.
Right.
Of course, the debt ceiling keeps getting raised. The debt gets bigger and bigger. Interest on the debt in 5 years is going to be more than what we're paying for Social Security. Okay? That's crazy. The big people will say, I'm worried about the threat to Social Security. The biggest threat to Social Security right now is that the government is borrowing so much money to pay for all of these other things. And it's not just Republicans and it's not just Democrats. It is what we call, right, the cult of the omnipotent state. It is a belief that government is supposed to do all of these things. And when we fall into the trap of that belief, when we don't fight as libertarians, and we allow everybody to continue with this illusion that government is the only solution to their problems, we end up threatening every aspect of every other solution. There's a wonderful article today, and I don't remember where I read it, by a Venezuelan, talking about the fact, it's like, look, Venezuela should have been paradise. We had a huge wealth of resources, right? We had oil, the most valuable resource. We had beautiful weather. We had wonderful agricultural business. How could any of this gone wrong? And the answer is they put a socialist state in place. They put an idea that the state was going to provide everything for everybody. And what happened? The country is in chaos. We're trying to fight against that.
We've only got a minute or two left. Dan Fishman, newly minted Executive Director of the Libertarian Party. Give us a couple of shameless plugs for what's coming up immediately in terms of fundraising, or how to contribute, and how to reach you.
So, easiest way to reach me is through the Libertarian Party webpage, lp.org. If you are not a member, that is the number one thing I want to change right now. Please go to lp.org/join. You can sign up. You can make a difference right now by increasing our membership numbers, and that shows a lot of things to our big donors. If right now membership's running around 14,000, if we could have membership, if we could increase it to 20,000, that shows a lot of donors that there's a lot of strength right now in the party. That brings in more money than just people signing up. You sign up right now as a $25 a year member, or even better, maybe you sign up as a monthly member, a pledge member. That makes a big difference for the party. Another thing that you can do right now is get involved in your local libertarian scene. So I'm going to Libertarian Party of New Hampshire convention tomorrow. Connecticut is also having their convention tomorrow. And then we're getting towards the end of convention season, but find a local libertarian meetup. Get off the keyboard, go to a bar or a meeting place, something on it. Spend time. One of the best things about what we do is get to hang out with other libertarians.
Right.
And when that happens, it's joyful. It really is, because we are one of the few people that truly we love each other. We love our differences.
And you can still have those same arguments they have on Facebook at a bar, but you know what? You'll probably be a lot happier with each other at the end. All right? Beer and root beer have a way of doing that, don't they?
They do.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thanks, sir.
I convince you're the right person at the right time, at the right place, for the right job.
I hope so.
There's a lot riding on your efforts. There's a lot of pressure there, and I admire you for heavy is the mantle. But, at the same time, I want to close with, I think, really the most powerful tool you bring to this organization is your unbridled sense of optimism. And I think if there's one thing we all need right now, you've had a lot of people who've been working really hard for a long time. And I think we all need that little checkup from the neck up, a little pick-me-up, a few laughs, a few tears, and just a moment in time where we all get together. 2020 is coming soon.
Yeah, let me steal a phrase from a different political party. The people united can never be defeated. All of us standing together, standing up for liberty. Dr. King once said, a man can't ride your back unless it's bent. Let's all of us stand up together.
We'll close on that, sir. Dan Fishman, Executive Director of your Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party, based in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm going to actually be visiting the office, Warnick, that in the next week or two, as I'll be down in that area. But, it doesn't take a trip to national. It doesn't take a conversation online with people. It takes a moment, look to yourself, and just say, what talents can I bring to the organization, both locally and nationally? What am I willing to do to guarantee my family and their future families, my descendants, their right to liberty? There's a little bit of a sense of obligation there. It's no longer okay just to sit on the sidelines, complain, whine, bitch, yell, without getting a little skin in the game. The Lord knows there's plenty of opportunity. And on that note, I want to say we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free. As always, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Some new people may be listening to this podcast in the coming days, so we ask you to please follow us on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. We're going to take an hour, as long as this show is on the air, every Friday night around 8 o'clock to bring to you, I believe, some of the best libertarian thought, some of the most compelling libertarian leaders, and a sense of purpose that we're going to look to deliver to the libertarian nation in our own little way here at the Coalition for the future. So join us, even if you can't for the earlier show, please join us on Friday night today. Dan, I hope we'll get back. We'll have all the candidates in. We're also going to be paying a lot of attention to grassroots advocates and activists who really invested huge portions of their life in sustaining and building this movement. And on that note, I say, we understand that you have a lot of choices to make on a Friday night. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week.